Greetings and welcome once more again. My name is Miriam. Today we are continuing with our prophetic series on the book of Revelation chapter 13. For those that have been following, in the previous presentation, we looked at the time dividing by time, which is another characteristic of the beast that comes out of the sea. And we have also confirmed with reference to literature and many other that the papal system do meet this requirement as well. Now, we also looked at the time or what was supposed to transpire during the time when the papacy was in reign. And from what I presented in the previous presentation, we learned that the papal system was to persecute God's people in that 1260 days. So for those that have missed, you need to go back and check. The video is available. You can check on it and then you can catch up with us. Now today we are looking at another characteristics. Now, as you can see in the title, is the return of the beast. Now, Revelation chapter 13 verse 10 tells us that he that leadeth into captive shall go into captivity, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. So the verse that we just read tells us that the one that leads other people into captive, he also is likely to be led into captive. Now there's a proverb that those who hunt elephants, they are likely to be killed by elephant, and there is a truth to it. So in verse 10 of Revelation chapter 13, we are told that he that leads others into captive will eventually be led into captivity. Now, we have discovered that in the previous presentation that at 1798, the papal system was captured by the general of Napoleon and then was taken captive, and he later died in there. Now, we are told that the Church of Rome has shed more blood than any other institution that ever existed among the mankind. This is Lecky, 1910, volume 2, page 32. So from what we are learning, from what this verse says, as we are discovering, or as we discover that the papacy killed many people and itself will eventually go into captivity. So history also confirms that. And just to add on that, we are also told that from the birth of popery to the present time, it is estimated by careful and credible historian that more than 50 million of human family have been slaughtered for crime of heresy by popish persecutors. Now, again, we are told that the papal system took people into captive, and in 1798, as alluded to, was taken into captive itself. Now, today we are looking at the return of the beast. Which beast is returning? As we have been studying so far, we only covered the first beast, which is the beast from the sea. We have not touched with the beast from the land. That will come at a later stage as we continue. Now, Revelation chapter 13, verse 3 tells us that, and I saw one of his head as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, here we are told of the same beast that went into captivity. Now, remember, if you looking at this verse in chronological order, you realize that they are not so, because verse 10 speaks about the beast that goes into captivity, and then verse 3 it talks about the return. So somebody might be asking, how come in verse 3 we are talking about the return when the captivity actually takes place in verse 10? So you can actually see and connect the dots that it's not in chronological order. So the beast goes into captivity, and then there is a return. All right. So the return comes after the captivity has taken place, or the wounding of the beast. Right. Now there's something that we are told in that verse. We are told that one of his head appeared to be wounded, and that wound was fatal. So in other words, after this beast was wounded, we are told that there's a recovery process, or John sees that the beast is going to do what? To recover, because the wound was healed. Now, first of all, I want us to look at the word wondered, or wonder after the beast. We are told that the whole world wondered after the beast, and this is after the word, after the wounding of the beast. So in other words, when the beast recovers, there is wondering after it. People are amazed, people are astonished looking at this beast. It seems something has changed that makes them to wonder. Now, according to the definition, this is Oxford Dictionary. It says, feeling of amazement and admiration caused by something beautiful, remarkable, or unfamiliar, or the person or things regarded as very good, remarkable, or effective. That's what they define wonder. So we are told that, this beast, when it went into captive, when it recovers, eventually when it returns, there is what this people are going to wonder after this beast. They're going to be amazed. It seems it comes up with the new things that people they can't help but just follow and be amazed and astonished by this beast. Now, in a normal circumstances, when you are injured, the healing process actually takes time. That's why it's a process. It doesn't happen instant. So here we are told that, the wandering after the beast occurs when the healing process occurs. So in other words, when this beast is healed, then there is a wandering after the beast, right? So this is when it occurs. So the wandering after the beast comes after or immediately as it begins the healing process. So when the healing process occurs, then people are wandering after the beast. Now, when you are wounded, your wound will take time. So it's a gradual thing that happens. So we should also bear in mind that the healing process of this fatal wound of the beast, it's not some instant a healing, but it's a process that will take some steps to bring a complete healing. All right. So again, I asked, when did the head of this beast get wounded? I think that we covered it in, at least I touched on it on the previous presentation, that it was during the 1798. But now to confirm, just for those that have missed, just to confirm a little bit on that with some literature here, it says, a deadly wound, undoubtedly, this prophetic symbol was fulfilled when Pope Pius was taken prisoner on February 15, 1798. So we are told that the wounding of the beast took place in 1798 when Pope Pius IV was taken into captivity by the General of Napoleon. Now, this is Maxwell on the study of Catholicism, part 7, dying on the vine and reviving. Right. Again, we are told that this is Schmidlin. This is a French historian in his book History on the Papacy. Right. He writes and he says, rarely during all its history had the church known more a critical situation. France, its eldest daughter, unfaithful to all tradition, was fallen into unbelief. Italy was wiped out, broken by revolution. Belgium was incorporated in French Republic. Germany was contaminated by the Age of Enlightenment. Spain and Portugal were governed by ministers who were hostile to the church. And in Great Britain, as well as Low Countries, the Catholic were brought down to the rank of isolate. In short, Catholicism as a whole was dying. So here again, we are taught by Schmidlin that, just like the other historian Maxwell tells us that it was 1798 that the papacy received this fatal wound, which is recovering. Schmidlin is telling us what transpired and what was the situation on the ground. So he's actually describing how the papal system came to that point, lost power, lost dominance. It is because eventually, he actually uses the word the eldest daughter, that is France. Why is he saying the eldest daughter? This is because France, kings like Clovis and many others, these were the ones who were advocating for papacy when the Western Rome fell. But now we see that eventually, as time went by, they started doubting as to the leadership of the papacy, and eventually they are the ones who took the papacy into captivity. Right. Now, in the recovery process of the papacy, as I said, that the recovery is a process, there are some things that will take place that we're going to be looking at now that will inform us how far the wound is about to come to a complete healing. And we need to look back into history for us to be able to understand what transpired and for us to be able to know that how far we have come. Now, Rome lost many of its states. Remember in 1798 when Napoleon general took over or took the Pope captive, we are told that eventually Napoleon gave hard time to the papacy. When you read the Encyclopedia Britannica on the reign of Napoleon from 1805 to 1814, somewhere there, we are told that Napoleon gave hell to the papacy. Now, this is because he would eventually capture one pope after the other, one pope after the other, and they had no peace. So he also made sure that they lost the states that the papacy controlled. Now, the interesting part is that in 1815, we are told that the papal system regained some of its state. So from the period when Napoleon was in power, that is 1805 to 1814, the papal system lost. So remember, the papacy was taken into captivity in 1798, and they chose another pope after that. But now the interesting part is that the pope that were chosen after that, they no longer hold territorial power. They no longer hold, global influence as the previous one, the one that was taken into captivity. They were now, their influence was reduced compared to the one that was taken into captivity. And so that is a significant part of it. So in 1805 to 1814, we are told that Napoleon kept on capturing the pope and sending them into exile and so forth until 1815. Now in 1815, somehow the papacy received some rest and they recovered some of the states that Napoleon has taken from them. But now history tells us, this Encyclopedia Britannica, Napoleon's Emperor from 1804 to 1814, we are told that from 1870 the papacy lost everything. They lost all the state, including Italy, which was the last state that was taken over from them by the king of Italy, or the leadership of Italy, when the king of Italy marched into Rome and then he took over, and then the papacy were only reduced to reduced to 108 square place, that is Vatican City. That's where they could they could stay and hide. No wonder you will find, when you just check on internet, it says the prisoner of the Vatican. This was the time when Italy marched into Rome and took over the last state that was belonging to the papacy. Now, why is it significant that we look at specifically at Italy and how it was stripped off from the papacy? Now, you remember, if you remember your geography very well, now Vatican City is in Rome. In other words, it is a state within a state. So Vatican City is a state within another state. And so now, and it's actually the only state that is independent, that has both political and spiritual leader. That is one person being a political and spiritual leader. So it is critical for us to understand that aspect, because the papacy could not be, could not influence the world again unless he obtained the power or recognition from that country where it is residing or its surrounding. So we are seeing that in the first step, so there are two steps in the wounding or the fatal wound of the papacy. We are looking at that so that we can actually see at the return of this beast. Now, the first step is that in 1798, actually, the papal system lost dominance of the world. It controlled the whole world. When the papacy spoke, everybody else listened. That was in 1798. So the papacy lost that dominance. It lost that influence. They no longer hold that control over the world. Right? That's number one. So that was a blow. And by the way, you might ask yourself a question to say, but why is the 1798 and this particular pope very interesting? Because there are more than there are about 45 pope or so that were exiled and sent out and taken captive and so forth. Why this 1798 one? Well, if you listen to the quotation that we read first, that is Schmidlin, he says the European territory, they began to lose their trust in the doctrines and the teachings of the Catholic. In other words, the strength or the teachings of the Catholic in these countries, which were the stronghold, began to wane. They started doubting the teachings and the principles and thereof. So as a result, the people themselves, they began to lose trust in that. Number two, the other thing is that when Napoleon actually invaded Rome, his general invaded Rome, the idea was to strike at the center of the unity of this system. So it is about the time frame that is pointed out by prophecy, the expiry of 1,260 days, and also the motive of the word of the captor, that is Napoleon's general. It will strike at the very center of Roman Catholicism. So that's what makes it more unique. So in 1870, then they lost the whole states that they had, including Italy. So the papal system lost the world in 1798, and in 1870 they lost Italy. So they were now reduced only to being a spiritual leader. In other words, by 1870, the papal system, the Catholicism, was just like any other religion, a religious leader with no political influence. Now, don't take my word for it, but listen to this one. Okay, this is it says on September 20, 1870, the troop of the Kingdom of Italy entered Rome, which was Pope's last remaining territory, and the Pope then, Pius, lost every territorial power. That is, the Pope was no longer a territorial temporal sovereign, but only a spiritual leader. Now, here we are told that the papacy actually lost territorial power and only remained as a spiritual leader. This is Roberto Regori is actually a reverend in the Catholic Church who was being interviewed on the significance of the Lateran Treaty that was signed in 1929. We're going to come to that now. Okay, and again we are told, right? So what we have looked so far is that the wounding of the beast. Number one, 1798, the Pope is stripped of the world influence or dominance, and then 1870, Italy is finally stripped off from the papacy. So for about 59 years, the popes that were chosen could only do things only in Vatican. They had no influence whatsoever with the world as far as diplomacy is concerned. So they had no political influence on any other while they remained prisoner in the Vatican. All right, so the healing of the wound then must also follow the same procedure, isn't it? Now, we saw that the wounding, it started with what? Stripping off the global influence from the papacy, and then stripping off Italy from the papacy. So the healing of the wound also must follow the same channel. That means only that this time in the reverse order. The papacy should be able to regain Italy, and then eventually work toward regaining the influence it has on the rest of the world. Right, this is Encyclopedia Britannica on the Lateran Treaty of 1929. It says, on February 1929, an historic treaty was signed between Italian government and Vatican, re-establishing political, now pay attention to that, it says re-establishing political power and diplomatic standing of the Catholic Church, which had been lost when Italy seized Rome, the last state of the papacy, in 1870. Are we following in what the encyclopedia is saying? Yes, what we are seeing here is actually confirming what I just said, to say, 1870, the papacy lost Italy. And now we are told that what transpired on February 1929 was actually to recover or to return, to re-establish the papacy as a political leader, as a power that can do, that can talk politics and other diplomatic talk with other countries. So here what transpired is that the papal system was now given back the power that she lost in 1870. Right, again, this is New York Times, a recording on the events of 11 February 1929. That is when the treaty was signed, right? And so the New York Times reports and says the Pope is again an independent sovereign, as he was throughout the Middle Ages, though his temporal reign, established today, is the most microscopic independent state in the world and probably the smallest in all history. Here we are told that the Pope has finally obtained its sovereign power, just as it was in the Middle Ages. Now that is something to pay attention to. Which years are regarded as Middle Ages? Now we are told that the Pope has finally gotten its independence just as it was in the Middle Ages. Now we need to ask the dictionary which ages or which years are recorded as Middle Ages. Right, this is the medievaltimes.com. It says the medieval era, often called as the Middle Age or the Dark Ages, began around 476 AD, following the great loss on the power throughout Europe by the Roman Emperor. Oh, by the way, did you catch the year 476 AD? So we are told that the Middle Ages, which we are told the papacy have regained power which she lost, which actually she exercised during the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages are referred to the time when Rome actually fell, that is, the Western Rome fell. So that was 476 AD. Remember when we were talking about the East and the Western Roman Emperor, and when the Western Roman Emperor divided into 10. And by the way, that was the time when we were looking forward to see the rising of the little horn, the very purpose that we are talking at. Now, we are told that, the papacy has finally obtained, independence, the power which she once held in the Middle Ages. Do you remember that at the fall of the Western European countries, this is the time that the papacy was beginning to rise? That by the time when we reach 538, this is the time that the papacy was in full-fledged power with the help of several emperors. And as a result, it began to do what? To reign. So we are told that now what transpired on Lateran Treaty of 11 February 1929 was to restore that power which the papacy had lost during that time. All right. So in other words, what power did they lose? They lost the global power in 1798, and then they lost the power over Italy. So now what happened in 1929 was to restore that power which she had actually lost. Right. Continuing in the significance of the Lateran Treaty, or the treaty that was signed in 1929 with Mussolini and Father Gaspari. Now, Mussolini was representing the Italian government, as he was the premier of Italy, and Gaspari was representing the Vatican. So the two men comes together and sit down and sign an agreement. We're going to look a little bit on the content of that Lateran Treaty. Right. Now, here again, this is Father Richard Cansti, okay, on the signing of the Lateran Treaty, the papaartifacts.com. Now here it says, this is a great piece of historical significance. Imagine if we had an image of everybody that signed the Declaration of Independence with their signature. And so this is incredible. It is really an historic item in regard to European history, because it's not just about Catholic part. It is that the Vatican city-state was finally recognized as a nation. Now he continued to say, the historic treaty signed by the Italian government and the Vatican restored a full political and diplomatic power to the Church. It made the Pope an independent sovereign ruler of a nation, the Papal State. Right. So the Lateran Treaty that was signed with between Mussolini and Gaspari actually gave an independence to the Vatican and the papacy, that now you are the sovereign ruler of this city. And not only that, but now you are given a political crown. You are a political leader as well as the spiritual leader of this state. Okay. And again, this is Father Roberto Regori. Okay, he says, at that point, it is understood that the Pope under the dominion, now he's speaking about the Lateran Treaty as well. So he says at that point, the Pope under the dominion of another sovereign cannot fully exercise his prerogative, his power, relation with all other states of the world. So at the end of the First World War, the urgency of finding a solution to the Pope's independence was addressed more energetically, and saw the Lateran Pact as the response to an attempt to papal independence shared with Italy. So the signing of the Lateran Treaty is a response to address the papacy's most need, which is the need of power. For it to be recognized as the country, the Vatican to be recognized as the country. So it was addressing what this bishop says it was an urgent need that the papacy needed. Right. So we have seen that the fatal wound, 1798, the papal system was stripped of, universal power, that is a global power, and then 1870 it was stripped of Italy. Now, Gaspari and Mussolini, they are restoring the political power which the papacy lost in 1870, right? So, now, on the healing of the wound, now listen to what Gazdin, another historian, writes in terms of the signing of that Lateran Treaty, which we are actually discussing now as part and parcel of the beginning of the healing of the papacy. Now, he is writing, he says, their meeting, that is Mussolini and Gaspari, was to be a secret guarded for the inner circle. But a story like so many of its kind leaked, and a crowd tense with excitement is here to witness the passage of these two men whose pen will heal the wound of 59 years. Hello, Reverend Gazdin, he's talking about the 59 years wound. He says, the signing of these two men brings a healing of the wound. Now, he's talking about 59 years. This is 1929, 11 February, as recorded. So, now he is actually referring to the injury that was caused in 1870. That is the stripping of Italy from the papacy. Of Rome from the papacy. Now, actually remember, there is a global stripping of power of the papacy. Then there is this Italy being, Rome stripped off from the papacy. Now, he is telling us that, the signing of these two men actually brought a healing of the wound. They are even recognizing it, that it was a healing of the wound. But now, this is just a first step. Remember, the healing of the wound. The wound, it's a process for it to heal. There is a step by step that will follow in order to bring a complete healing. So what Gaspari here and these men were doing were marking the first step in healing of the papacy, as we are going to check. Now, have you thought about it? Have you considered why the Lateran Palace? The signing of this important document was done at the Lateran Palace mission. Now, by the way, they could have actually signed it at the Vatican or any other place, but why specifically at the Lateran Palace? Now, they will tell us there is nothing like coincidence. Rome doesn't leave anything to coincidence or by chance. There is a reason for every event at every place where it takes place in Rome doing. Now, listen to what we are told. It's still Reverend John Gazdin. Now, in his article, this is an article that was published in Brisbane, Australian newspaper on April 18, 1929, the historic scene in the Lateran Palace. Now, he is telling us, he's going to give us the reason why the Lateran Palace instead of Vatican, instead of any other some good, nice place. So he is saying there were no really grave reason why the document could not be signed at the Vatican. Now, listen to what he says later. He says, instead, the Holy Father decided the historic hall of the Pope of the Lateran Mission Museum should once again see history, that the background of the signing of the peace with the country in which the supernatural center of the church is found should be an institution organized to make it clear that Catholic city is above all flags. I want you to pay attention to what Gazdin is saying. He says, the Pope fathers, or the fathers, they chose the Lateran Palace, which was actually one of their hall, their mission hall. And they said they specifically chose this place for a particular reason. By the way, when you go and read this article and download all of it, you actually realize that it's not just about the palace. Even the tables that were there was significance about it. They came from where the curtains, everything. So Rome wanted everyone to send a message to say, we are in charge, and that Catholic is above all flag. That's why it has to be done in the historical monument of the Catholic Church, and that was a Lateran Palace, not in any governmental whatsoever, but they chose their venue. So it was not a coincidence. There was something significant to tell the rest of the world that Catholic is on top of everything. Right. Now, what about the content? What about the content of the Lateran Treaty? Now, somebody might say, but it doesn't really matter. After all is done and dusted. Now, it does matters a lot. Now, just a brief one on some of the things that were involved. This is Encyclopedia Britannica on the event of the Lateran Treaty 1929. Now, I just highlighted only some few things that got my interest in the Lateran Treaty. Number one, Rome was to be recognized as a center of Catholic world. That's number one. And the second, recognize papal sovereign over the Vatican City and secure full independence for the Pope. That was the second thing. And then the other thing that is highlighted is that all bishops were to take a loyalty oath to the state. Did you catch that? All bishops, every bishop that comes to the throne as a bishop was to take a loyal oath that they will be loyal to the state. That is, they will be loyal to Italy. It reminds me of something. So there is a state church here. We see the church and the state coming together and try to make an agreement to say your bishop, they'll be loyal to the state. And we are told that they had to be Italian and they had to speak Italian language. Now, the fourth one is the one that really caught my attention. It says the state agreed to permit religious instruction in public, primary and secondary school, and conceded to the bishop the right to appoint or dismiss those who imparted such instruction and approved the textbook that they used. In other words, in simple terms, Catholicism was the religious of the state. So in other words, if you are going to take your child to any school during this time, that child was to learn Catholicism or to learn to be taught Catholic doctrine. This was part of the agreement. Now, that sounds very interesting. In other words, it was compulsory for each school to have Catholic teachings at their schools, and the bishop were to select the textbooks that were to be used at that. Marriage were to be conducted according to the Catholic laws as well. All right, so the question that we need to look at. So number one, we saw the healing process involved, the union or an agreement between the papacy and Italy, right? That's the first step. So in the fatal wound, we saw the reaping power from the papacy on the global scale by Napoleon. That is in 1798. And then in 1870, we see the papacy losing Italy. Now, healing process, the papacy has to follow the same step only in reverse. All right, now, does the signing of the Lateran Treaty of 1929, does it have significance on the papal's recovery of the world dominance? As we have seen that they lost power in 1798, does this signing of this Lateran Treaty have some significance to the papacy regaining of dominance on the global scale? Well, they will tell us if this signing of the Lateran Treaty has some significance on papacy regaining a global dominance. Reverend Gaston Joan answers that question. Does it have significance on the papacy's healing, the second step of the healing, which is the recovery of a world governance? Now, here we are told, it says, he continues in his article, it says, the newsmen, that is the media, here in this piazza, that is at the Lateran Palace when they were signing, Mussolini and Gaspari, they were signing. He says, the newsmen here in this piazza will not mention to the Parisian, to the Londoners, or the New Yorkers. But this peace is not made alone for Italy, pay attention, or Europe or America. It is made by Pope passionately devoted to uniting all men. Did you catch that? So the Lateran Treaty signing was not just made for the Europeans and so forth, but for uniting all men. Now he continued to say, the earth under one banner, a pope from whom African, Oceania receive every whit the same concern as the Western world. So what is the ultimate objective of the papacy in signing the Lateran Treaty in 1929? The objective is not to end with Italy. The objective is to obtain governance which she lost in 1798, because here we are told by the Reverend himself, he says the ultimate goal is to unite all men on earth under one banner, and that is the papacy, from which they should receive order. It's not my word, it is their word. Now, what is the current events? What is the current situation? Are we seeing the events that are directed toward attaining that power which she once lost? Unless you are not following the news, but if you are, actually you will see and know that the papacy is on warpath to make sure that she returned that which she lost. Now, for example, what transpired in Vatican on February 11, 2013? Now, remember, we are told that the world will wander after the beast when the healing process begins, right? When the healing process begins, because now what we are reading from the Bible, we are seeing that the Bible tells us that the wound is actually what is healed, and then the whole world wandered after the beast. So the wandering after the beast comes or begins when the healing process also has started. So what transpired on February 11, 2013? Now, if you are following Vatican news, you realize that Pope Benedict XVI resigned as the papacy. Now, you understand that he gives some reason for his resignation, right? And we are also told that immediately after he made that announcement, thunderbolt strike St. Peter Basilica, right? Now, some spectators and eyewitnesses that saw this event, they started, contemplating to say, could this be a bad omen? The Pope is resigning and the lightning strike St. Peter? Well, I leave you to guess and decide and think what you want to think. But I'm going to present to you some of the things that are very crucial that followed after his resignation. All right, so we are told he resigned, and now listen to some of the reasons he apparently gave as a reason as for him to step down. Now it says Pope Benedict. This is Michelle Boston, 2022, in her article "When and Why the Pope Benedict Resigned," Washington Post, December 31st. Right, she writes. She says, Pope Benedict was the first pope in 600 years to resign from his office on February 11, 2013. The last time that the Pope resigned was around 1415 AD. So about 600 years has passed. No Pope has resigned. They either die and that's it, another one comes. So here we have Pope Benedict resigning. Why was he resigning? Now listen what she writes. She says that the modern world was changing so quickly and profoundly that someone of his age and era was no longer suited to be the papacy. Question: when Pope Benedict came to power, was he a young man? Obviously not. He was an old man. In fact, that post, they don't choose some young person. They choose somebody who is old and well acquainted with the doctrines and the principles of Roman Catholicism. They don't just choose anybody. Now, but why is he giving his age as a reason for his stepping down? The actual truth is that, yes, it is true. He's saying things are changing profoundly. There is a truth to that. Things are changing very fast. And now he has to step down to pave way for a more nobler person, right? Who will be able to speed up and fast forward the aim and the goals of the church. So he has to step down and somebody has to come in there. Now, and guess who came to the throne after he stepped out? Now that was Pope Francis. Now, there is something that is very interesting about Pope Francis. These are facts. This you can go and check. You can go and check facts about Pope Francis when he came into power. You will be shocked by some of the things that you find there. But this is news. You can actually get them. Now, when Pope Francis came, now there are things about him that makes him so unique. I'm not saying he's the last Pope. I know that we leave it to God. God is in control of everything. He can be the last. There can still be others and so forth. But what I'm interested in is in the facts or things that are associated with this papacy and how they are speeding up the process of the healing of the wound on the global scale, because we've already seen on Italy as a country, the papacy has already healed. That process has begun. But the completion of the healing is when the papacy received the global power, or the dominance that she once lost in 1790. So what are some of the facts about this new pope that came in 2013? Now, first of all, Pope Francis, the first Jesuit. Now, Jesuits were established by Loyola. Now, this order was established in order to counteract the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant who broke away from the Roman Catholicism. So it was established to infiltrate them and counteract all the doctrines so that they can come back to Rome or to Catholicism. That's number one. So he is a Jesuit, and they still hold those principles up to today. You can go and search on them, and they are all to make your hair stand. That's how terrible they can be. Right. Now, he is a Jesuit. That's number one. Number two, he is the first pope to address the U.S. Congress, that is American lawmaker. Why would he speedily address the U.S. Congress and not the European Union? Because the European guys, they are already, influenced by him. Remember, Italy is in Europe and many other countries. So now the target is the American lawmaker. Why? Because the American Constitution guarantees the freedom of religion, liberty of conscience. And that Constitution of America is what the papal system does not like. And so he has to make sure that somehow, somewhere, he gets in there. Because once America repudiates its Constitution, then we're going to see some hell broke loose. But we're going to get into that in the next series, not today. Right. Right. And so the third fact about Pope Francis, that he's the first one to take up the name Francis of Assisi. Now, you just need to go into some Catholic doctrine to read Francis of Assisi. Now, this is the man who advocated for nature, and you can be sure that Pope Francis is living up to that standard. In 2015, he released the second encyclical letter, Laudato Si, and you can actually see it's more dedicated into preserving nature and so forth. He advocates for that. In fact, he advocates for the rest of nature, Mother Nature, our common home, and so forth. And he writes that encyclical letter, which he gives to every leader of, every world leader to read and meditate on it and to think about it, as he says that they should be working together. Right. He is the first pope to be named the Time Person of the Year by Time magazine. Hello? That's how popular he got, that within the 9 months of his office, he has gained popularity, that the Time magazine, they have to name him the Person of the Year. Right. So now you can actually see how popular these men have gotten within just a short period of time. So now, what other things have these men promoted? You realize that when you read Catholic writings, even some of his church members, they've started to say, but he has shifted from theological point to more on what on ecological things, which does not concern the church. Well, let me not speak for myself here. Let him say what his mission is. Okay. Now, this is now the response that he was giving. Now it writes, says, so much he has been done in his brief 9 months of his office has really changed the tone that is coming out of the Vatican. He is saying we are about the healing mission of the church and not about theological policy work. This is E.K. Kim 2013, Pope Francis named Time Person of the Year. So here Kim is quoting the papacy statement to say we are about the healing mission of the church. Does this guy know his history? He knows very well. And he's talking about what? About the healing. Now, this is 2013, 2014 when he's coming to power, 2015, and so forth. Already the Lateran Treaty has been what? Has been signed. So if it was just simply about regaining power over Italy, then he should be satisfied, right? No, he is not satisfied, because he's not only looking for gaining control over Italy, but he wants to gain control over the rest of the world. And that's why he says his mission is a healing mission for the church. Why? Because he also refers to the 1798 wounding, which is now where they lost power from the global perspective. So he's on the mission to make sure that the church returns to that point. Okay, right. So this is New York Cardinal Timothy also has something to say regarding the purpose when he came. So much amazement and admiration on this guy. Now he says the Pope has captivated the world since he first became the household name earlier this year. So everybody is looking to say, no, this guy, he has actually become, popular, and is actually changing the way things are done in the Vatican City. Now, not only that, but the papacy right now, in his later encyclical letter, he's in advocating for Mother Nature rest. And his solution in line 237 is that there should be rest for nature in keeping the Sabbath. Now, he's not referring to the Sabbath of the fourth commandment according to the Bible. He's referring to the Sabbath of the first day of the week. Right? And he's saying this will be part and parcel of the solution to climate change and many other. Right? Now, you're wondering, why am I telling you all this? It is because, as I said in some earlier video, that the healing of the wound, or the process, or the things that happened in the past, will repeat, and we just need to look at it. For example, the signing that Mussolini actually did is the same as what Constantine did. So Constantine signed and gave the seat to the papacy. And then another emperor finished up the whole process. So what Gaspari and Mussolini did was to give the papacy power, just like what Constantine did, to give the power to the what? To the Bishop of Rome. So Gaspari and Mussolini, they meet together and do just that. But there has to be a Justinian. There has to be some another power that will finish up what Justinian also did. Constantine gave that power, and Justinian finished it off, and then the papacy began to rule in 538, when Justinian actually helped the church by eliminating the enemy. So who is the modern Justinian who is going to come on to help finish the process of the healing of the wound that was started by Mussolini? Now, as you are listening out there, as a Protestant, will you follow the beast and wander after it? Or you will follow the lamb? These prophecies are recorded so that you and I will be able to know what is coming and make our relationship with God. And then we will be called to stand. You might be thinking, okay, when all these things happen, when the papacy gain power and go against those who refuse to obey his command, then I might be dead by then. It's not up to you to decide. It is God that decides who will be resting in their grave and who will go through that. What if God decides that you will pass through it? And even if you were to rest, even if you were to die, the question is, will you rest in the hands of Christ? Would you have made your decision to follow Christ? Would you have an assurance that when you are resting or when you are dying in the hands of God? Or will you die with no hope of rising in the first resurrection? And this is why today we are called today that when we hear his voice, we should not harden our hearts. This message is going to each and every one of us to prepare for what is coming, to help us to stand firm and not waver. We are to follow the lamb and not to wander the beast. Just like the songwriter says, I will follow thee, my Savior. The question is, will you follow the Savior or will you wander after the beast? For now, it's bye-bye. I'm going to see you in the next presentation when we're going to look at the modern Justinian, the power that will finish off the healing of the wound.
I will follow. to Jordan's rolling billows, cold and deep, thou leadest me. Thou hast crossed the waves before me, and I still